My name is Stephanie Stoccaro, and I am going to be teaching a lesson going over the key ideas and details. This lesson is lesson 1 of 5, so it would be Monday. I am teaching 3rd grade level. The setting is general in a whole classroom, and the content area, again, is key ideas and details based off of the content standards CCSS, ELA, Literacy RL 3.1, and CA ELA 3.2.3. This lesson is going to be based upon the California State English Standards and will focus on key ideas and details. The lesson is going to cover how to ask and answer questions based upon a reading, and the students will learn how to locate their answers within a text. This is important for 3rd graders for a variety of reasons. The first of which, it will help students on their state testing as they are asked to read a short story and answer questions based upon that reading. The ability to ask and answer questions by referring to their readings will be an important foundation to their future education as well. IEP annual goal is that by December 1st, 2020, the student will demonstrate comprehension skills by identifying answers in the text with 85% accuracy on 3 of 5 consecutive trials as measured by teacher-charted student records and student work samples. Some accommodations and modifications are that the student is going to be provided with a different story that includes pictures. The student will be provided a different worksheet that asks straightforward questions based on their reading, focusing more on the setting and characters, not so much the plot. The student will work with a group who has a clear understanding of this content and is comfortable in this area. The student is allowed to work outside and will be allowed extra time to complete the assignment. The student will also be given a different exam at the end of the lesson that it contains another easier passage and easier to find questions within the reading. For my English language learner, I have the ELD standard of 3.1.1, which is exchanging information and ideas with others through collaborative discussions on a range of social and academic topics. Some accommodations and modifications for the English language student is that students will be provided with a worksheet that includes translated instructions and translated questions, and then the story will also be translated as well. The students will be allowed extra time to complete this assignment, and they will be provided with a translated recording of the story so that they can listen to it in Spanish while following in English. And this provides the student with a direct translation while being able to follow along. For academic language demand, we have key vocabulary and content vocabulary. So characters, they're going to learn that they are the people within a story. The narrator is the person telling a story. The plot is the arrangement of the events within a story. Setting is the time and place of a story. Conflict is the problem within a story. Point of view is the narrator's position relating to how the story is told. So first, point of view is narrator is in the story while telling it. And third is that the narrator is outside of the story. The students will also learn that a protagonist is the hero within the story, typically the main character. The antagonist is the villain or bad guy in a story who works against the other characters. And the resolution being the end of the story in which the problem is resolved. By the end of the lesson, the students should know what each word means and should be able to find these within a story. Before I go over any examples with them, I will again review what these mean and will play a short video for them that also explains what the differences are. So for academic language demand, continuing, the language skills, students will be able to read a text and identify the key vocabulary terms, which were the terms I just went over, so characters, plot, protagonist, antagonist, etc. For their language forms, they will be able to form answers to questions based upon their readings. They will be able to answer them by locating the information or answer found within the text. So I will explain to the students that before they can answer a question, they have to have found the exact answer within the text. The language functions so that students will be able to correctly identify the parts within a story and will be able to locate evidence within the text. Again, their worksheet will ask them questions based on their reading, and part of the answer will be them having to state where in the story they found it, which paragraph. And for task analysis, students must be able to read a text and determine the plot, characters, etc. within the story by using evidence found from the text. So we're really focusing on being able to read a story and easily locate the main ideas and big takeaways within that story. Like, what were the main events that occurred? Who were the main people within the story? Why was this story significant? That's going to be a huge part of our lesson. Some of our objectives are that students will understand the list of vocabulary terms and will be able to read a story and determine the plot, characters, and aside from just knowing the definition of what is plot, what are the characters, they will be able to also find them within a story. And they will be able to answer their questions based on readings by finding the answers within the text. Again, that's going to be really emphasized when they begin to work on their worksheet, and also when I go over examples with them as a class, as I will have them wait to raise their hand until they have found the answer within the text, as I will ask them for the answer, but also where they found it in the story. This will help them really be able to understand the story and how to quickly find information within the story, but it will also help the students surrounding them who might be struggling to find the answer. It will help them kind of narrow down where to start looking for things. So the assessment, which I will be giving out at the end, this will come after I go over a few examples, and after my students do group work, working on a few worksheets, they'll be given an assessment shown on the right-hand side of the screen. It's called Raccoon Rex. Basically, I'm going to give them the story as well as a handout that asks them who the main character is, asks them what the plot was, were there any antagonists, protagonists. We'll ask them all of their vocabulary words, as well as asking them to define their vocabulary words to the best of their abilities. So, in order to ensure my class has a clear understanding, I will hand out an assessment that has a short story. We'll have the students determine the character's plot and setting, which they will have plenty of time to complete this assignment. As they leave for lunch, I will ask each student to tell me the definition of any one of their vocabulary words, and the student must be able to answer in order to leave for lunch. So, as the students get out to leave, I will ask each individual student, who are the characters? What are characters? I will say, in the reading Raccoon Rex, what was the setting? What time of day was it? I will ask them each a different question based on the assessment as they leave, and that answer will have to be, they'll have to give me an answer in order to leave for lunch. And this way, I will be able to get immediate feedback as to who's struggling, but also it will encourage my students to pay attention to the lecture and the assignment that they do with their group a little bit more. Some instructional strategies. So my instructional strategies kind of blend guided and independent teaching strategies because I think super important for third graders to have a clear understanding of the instructions and an understanding of what's expected of them. However, I do believe that students learn the most and develop the most when they are given the chance to struggle through questions and to really work through a problem on their own versus having a teacher tell them what is right and what is wrong. So I will go over the terms with my students and I will show them examples before asking them to complete the task on their own or before even discussing the fact that there will be an assessment. As they work on the assignment, I will walk around the classroom to ensure that the students are understanding the questions and that they're staying on task. The biggest reason I'm going to start walking around is because I don't want them to practice the wrong thing. I don't want them to be answering the questions in a wrong way and to be practicing the incorrect way of doing them. Mary Alice Gunter states the importance of checking on students during the activity when she writes, quote, "The teacher should circulate during independent practice, checking that no student is repeating a mistake or is actually practicing error," end quote. That was on page 71 of our textbook. And that is just so important that if you just sit at your desk reading papers, the students may just be doing the wrong thing, and it's really just a waste of time because they are practicing error, and you want to ensure that they're not doing that. I will also be using attention signals to refocus the class if they begin to get off topic, or if I want to grab their attention during their group work. I use hola, and the class repeats this back to me. Again, I will review the signals during the intro like I always do with them, but I focus heavily on signals as the use of hand signals. When they agree with another student, they do the sign language of that. The students are able to silent celebrate when they, which is just like jazz hands, when they get an answer correct or when they're excited about a task that we might have coming up. But I'm really big on keeping my classroom mellow and keeping the excitement level high but not out of hand. So by doing these simple attention signals, I am able to quickly refocus my class and quickly, they're able to understand that I want their attention and that they need to stop what they're doing and pay attention. So again, I'll go over these in the introduction. Some required teacher background information is that I will have to be familiar with the stories before going into the lesson, and I will have formed open-ended questions to get the students discussing the stories. I will have a video going over the vocabulary words. I will have that ready to go before they come in, and I will have watched the video a few times to know if I should stop it, if I should pause the video and explain some more, if I should skip some parts, etc. I will have prepared a worksheet and to go along with the readings and the lesson, and I will also have the prepared assessments and worksheets for my SPED and English language learner students. So really just knowing the stories and knowing how to create a conversation about them and how to begin getting the students to discuss character, plot, and all these different aspects within a story on their own and within their own thinking is really going to be an important part to this lesson. So, starting off, the students are coming in after recess, and every day after recess, we do an after recess dance party, or you could call it a brain break, whatever. It's just really to get the students back in the zone of learning and to get them refocused. So for this one, I found a perfect video for our lesson. So I'm going to play that for them.
Characters. The people are the characters. The characters. The people are the characters. Or even dogs or cats or birds.
After going over the video and having the students kind of dance and sing along with it, I will go more in depth. I will discuss what is the beginning, what is the middle, what is the end, and I will also go into more detail about the other words not covered within that video, such as plot, or point of view, etc. In the end of the lesson, I will do a review video that includes that, but just as their dance party, this one was a super fun little thing on YouTube that I found that I thought would get them excited to learn. So after watching the video, I will start by reviewing their vocabulary words. I'll have them posted on the board with answering any questions. I'm gonna, ask, does anyone know who the characters are after our song? Does anyone know what the setting is after our song? And I will begin discussing with them, getting them to think about what these terms mean and how they might be able to go about finding them within stories. I'll have them talk about their favorite TV show or movie or book and ask them if they can think about the setting or characters or plot that goes along with those. So I'm going to really start it by getting them engaged in the conversation and by just starting with open-ended questions that really have no right or wrong answers. They're just going to get the students engaged. After we review their words and they kind of have an understanding of that, I will review the rules of like some class rules, like what it takes to popcorn read and have class discussions. I will remind them the order in which they read, the importance of letting other students struggle through words and not laughing if someone makes a mistake. I'll remind them to raise their hands when they want to add to the conversation and how they should show other students that they're listening. I will remind them that they need to pay attention during the lesson by telling them that I'm going to ask them a question about their reading or vocabulary terms as an exit ticket out of the door for lunch. After I review the attention signals and practice them with the class and what's expected of them, I will go ahead and hand out the reading to start the class reading. So for our class story, I chose to use a bit smaller of one to get the reading done quicker so the students could begin to work together, and so that we could leave a little bit more time to explain what I'm expecting of them and go over any questions the students might have. And on the right of the screen is the group work. It's a little story called The Solver, and I will hand that out to them to work their table groups and answering questions about that story. My lesson sequence. So I'm gonna start by introducing the lesson, reviewing the important things like attention signals and the vocabulary terms. I will hand out their worksheet. The worksheet will include both stories and questions that follow the group work stories. So the first story doesn't have any questions written on it because I really don't want them to worry about having an answer down for the first story. I want the students to really focus on the conversation that we're going to be having about the story, and I want them to really pay attention so that they can truly understand what they're going to be doing when they begin to work on the second story in their groups. So I'll have us popcorn read or snake read the first story as a class. So we'll start on the left-hand side and have the first student read a sentence, and then so on and so forth until every sentence is read, and hopefully every student has gotten a chance to read. After we have read the story, we'll have a quick discussion about the reading. I'll say, does anyone think they can tell me where the story took place? Does anyone think they can tell me what that means? What is where the story took place? Is that characters? Is that plot? Or is it setting? So we're going to really focus on the different parts within the story when discussing it. And after we go through the first story as an example, I will let the students work in their table groups to complete the second reading and the questions associated with that story. At this point in time, I'll walk around the classroom to ensure that students are staying on task and are again not practicing any errors. They are completing the correct work and they are understanding the questions that are being asked of them. Once the groups have completed the worksheet, we will have a class discussion about the work they completed, and we will go over the answers and any questions they may have had. I'll go around. There's the same amount of questions as our table groups. There are 6 questions. So each table group will answer one of 6 questions. And when I ask them to tell me the answer, I will again ask them to point out where they found it in the text. Was it a wild guess? Do you just remember? Were you able to locate the answer? If there's any trouble with a question, that's the time when we're going to really go over it, and that's when I'll open up the floor for questions about what they're doing and any confusion they might have. And so once I believe that the students are comfortable with this, after our discussion, I will then hand out an assessment to test their individual understanding. At this time, I will be circulating the classroom to keep the students focused and to ensure each student is completing his or her own work. However, I will not be answering any questions at this time, as it is an assessment to test their understanding, and I can't answer a question about what the plot is or what the characters are because that's what I need to know if my students know and understand. After the assessment, I will collect the exams and I will again ask each student, to give me the definition of a term or tell me part of their story as a ticket out of the door for lunch. And once the students return from lunch, I will replay the first video and also revisit the other vocabulary terms and other videos. I will instruct them to sing along and get into it and take this opportunity to again just get any wiggles out and just kind of get into it. My class is super fun because they are 3rd graders and they are always super excited about dance parties. So I will encourage them to get up and sing and dance, as this is a perfect way for students to be able to really memorize things. After we do that, I will have the students form a discussion circle, so that we can go over their assessment that they took out. And I can answer any questions they might have had, and we can talk about the difficulties that might have occurred. At this time, the students will be encouraged to discuss what they thought of the story, what they found easy to find in the story, and what they might have found more difficult for them. We will do a final review of the vocabulary words, and I will encourage them to continue to look for the characters, plot, and other vocabulary terms that we have gone over within their favorite song, movie, or TV show, play, anything, book. And on Tuesday, day 2, we will begin our day by having a little mini show and tell or discussion circle, if you will, where the students are able to either bring in a book, movie, whatever, or they don't have to bring it, but really it's going to be an opportunity for them to discuss what they found in their worlds around them, and what they were able to see our vocabulary words in. So this is a really good way for them to be excited about it and go home thinking about what we went over. Universal access. So this lesson has been created to include all students within the general education classroom, including English language learners and special education students. I have made modifications of the worksheets for both English language learners and SPED students, and have provided translations for the English language learners and simplified versions for the SPED student. I have accommodated both English language learners and the SPED students by giving them extra time on the assignment and by allowing the SPED student to work outside when needed. So really trying to incorporate all students within this lesson is super important and not necessarily challenging, but you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way where everybody can develop and learn from the lesson. This lesson can be integrated into a history lesson, as we often have to determine the people within the historical story, the location in which it took place, the year the event took place. We need to pay close attention to the point of view. Who's telling the story? Is it biased? Students need to be able to determine all parts of the historical story in order to have a clear understanding of what occurred. So this would overlap perfectly when reading historical texts. There are all kinds of history movies, TV shows, and books, articles, and resources that would really confuse somebody if they tried to understand every single little thing within them. But if the students are able to decipher which parts of the text are important and which aren't, it will really help them in their education and just their everyday life as well. I hope to see my students engaging in the reading discussions with at least 90% participation of the class. That includes within their group, that's why I do group work, because I know a lot of students are too shy to discuss in front of the whole class. So when I'm walking around, I get to see who's participating, who's discussing the questions, who's reading, who's not. I also hope to have at least 3/4 of my students score an 85% or higher on the final assessment. I will assess my personal teaching objectives by grading the final assessment to see how well the students did, and I will be able to focus on student participation while students are working at their table groups, as some students are too shy to share in front of the entire class. By playing a video that has a song attached to the parts of the story, I hope to give the students a fun, meaningful lesson that will stay with them when they leave at the end of the day. Some materials needed would be worksheets with the 2 stories, Miss Mitchell's Comment and the Solver. And students will need a pencil and eraser. I use the video explaining the story, the link available there. And I will also need an assessment with the short story Raccoon Rex by Ruth Donnelly. So not a whole lot of equipment and material needed, but super important things to have for the lesson. Huge resources, awesome, helped me so much. We have our textbook, the Gunter. Don't know what happened to the formatting of it on this. I'm sorry, it's totally not in proper format for this, but should be indented. Anyways, we have a instruction on models approach, 4th edition. And we have addressing disruptive and non-compliant behaviors, understanding acting out cycle. So really the IRS Center and their textbook were incredible resources, as well as YouTube for that super fun video. Thank you for watching.